Welcome to Two Baptists and That Amish Chick, a podcast brought to you by the Butterchurn Girls. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Bethany.
And I'm Berlin. Join us for candid conversations about organized religion, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how we broke free from it while holding on to our faith in God.
In these candid conversations, you can expect to laugh, to relate, occasionally cry, and definitely hear a few cuss words.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and follow at the Butterchurn Girls on all socials. Now for this week's episode.
Have you ever dealt with anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, any trauma-based things before as a Christian and wondered where do you go to even get help? That is the topic we are going to talk about this week is how to work through those things and even how to where to go to find help, because the church is so often
Not helpful.
aren't the most helpful places, right?
They actually make it worse for most people.
Many cases, right? And that's even true for us. We'll tell some of our story during this. Welcome back. We are so excited to have you. Let's jump in.
Yeah. So I know for myself, because we were talking about this before we hit record about Berlin asked me, well, did you even know what depression was? And honestly, I didn't. I didn't know what anxiety, depression, those things were not talked about growing up Amish, because if you had a problem or you struggled, you just weren't doing things right, or you weren't doing enough, or
your checklist wasn't complete.
Yes.
Your checklist Christianity
or
wasn't.
you were sinning somewhere, and so this was a result of that.
Oh my gosh.
Or you just didn't have enough faith.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to grow your faith. Okay, if I feel like I have such a problem with that, because that is such an ignorant, stupid answer to something that is so much more than faith, than Christianity. But it often has nothing even to do with your faith.
Yeah, right.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It is not even the same thing. You're trying to put out a fire with building a house. That doesn't even duh. What the heck are you doing? You're not going to put out that fire by building something. That is the complete opposite of how very different that answer is to actually solving the problem.
And really, that's just a distraction technique.
Yes.
It's not going to fix anything. It's not going to heal anything. That anxiety, that depression, that whatever is still going to be there. Mm-hmm. But it's behind us because we're just going to focus over here. But this is going to rear its ugly head at some point, and it's going to come back. So going after what it's about, what started it, where did it come from? Yeah. It's so often overlooked.
Yes.
Yeah, that's super good. Going to the root cause of it. And I think that's the thing, is so often we are told that anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, any other kind of mental illness, mindset struggle, we would call it a heart struggle. It's actually really what it is. Yeah. First of all, they're dismissed a lot of times in church culture, right? They're either dismissed, or it's you need to set yourself aside and put others first. You're thinking about yourself too much. There's selfishness involved in there. It can be a bunch of different labels and stuff that are put on it that aren't true. I always think if God is a good father, would a good father look down at his daughter who's struggling with depression and go, you're just thinking about yourself too much? Yeah, no, unfortunately, there are people and parents that say those things, but no, a really kind, loving, attentive, connected parent is not going to say that to their child, grown or at child age, right? And so I think that's an important thing to look at, is that oftentimes they don't it's dismissed in and of itself. And so looking at where the root of what it comes from is really important, because you have to dig in, you have to go deep. For me, I dealt with depression, and what's funny is not funny, but one thing that's interesting is when you are in depression, sometimes you don't even realize it
100%.
Yes.
until you're out of it. And so I look back at those phases of my life and I'm like, holy crap, I was a super down person, and I was depressed, right? I was unhappy in so many areas of my life. And it just drug me down. And so that's one thing I think, first of all, I realized is that in the Christian realm is start looking at yourself and go, am I actually depressed? Am I dealing with anxiety? What is the root cause of this? How do I actually deal with this?
And asking those questions isn't a lack of faith. It isn't
you're questioning God.
Right. It's not.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so it's
those are the cliche answers that are given to everything.
It's the church doesn't like gives the idea that those questions aren't good questions to ask.
Mhm.
Why is it not a good question to go, am I okay?
Mhm.
Like, am I okay? Like, anytime you have pain, are you going to go, like, you fall and like hurt your arm? Are you going to go, oh, well, Jesus has got it, and just walk along? Or are you
Right.
going to go, okay, is this hurting in a way that's different? Is it broke? Is it just a muscle? Is it something that's going to get a little better? And you're going to pay attention to it.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden it comes to mental health and it's taboo, and we don't
Mhm.
ask about it. We don't address the issue.
But then we talk about people, we're a 3-part being, body, soul, and spirit, right? But we only treat it as like only your physical body can get sick.
Mhm.
Anything else can't get sick. Your mind can't get sick, or anything be wrong with it. Because if there is, then there is something wrong with you, like you sinned. It's like a you problem instead of a like something happened to me and I'm hurting.
And then all of a sudden, like, oh, my mind is hurting, like with
Mhm.
anxiety, depression, etc. But then all of a sudden it's a spirit issue. Your mind is part of your
Yeah.
soul. Your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. And so we're trying to fix mind, will, and emotions by focusing on the spirit or focusing on the body. Like, yes, they're going to like benefit and support. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
discounting that, but you're not paying attention to your soul.
Mhm.
How do you expect to fix issues that are within the soul if you're not focusing on it, not paying attention to it? And I'm using the word soul right now, but another word that we actually really like to use in regards to that is kind of like the heart,
Mhm.
right? And so a lot of like, that's actually a really big question that a lot of people have asked me as I did, some of like emotion work and different stuff with people, like the heart and the soul and spirit. Like, they have
Mhm.
question on like, how are all of those different? And so just so you know, soul and heart are pretty similar. Like, you
Yeah.
might have even a
Mhm.
different, slightly different take on that, but like your spirit and your body are communicating through the soul.
Yes.
And so it's like the lens with which they communicate. And
Mhm.
it's sometimes we've got to clean the lenses, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually noticing hairspray on my glasses as I'm looking at the lights. I'm like,
Leslie's
appropriate.
lenses.
I need to clean my lenses. But it allows that communication within
Yeah.
yourself
Mhm.
Yeah.
to like move so much more freely if you pay attention to your soul.
Yeah. That is one of the best explanations that I've ever heard. And actually, Miles Monroe, if you don't know who he is, go look him up on YouTube. He's amazing.
Mhm.
He's like a forerunner in a lot of things. Like, he did things before their time, basically. And he talks about how your soul is the communication for your body to your spirit and your spirit to your body. And if you think about that, if you're let's say you're talking on the phone and there's a ton of static, do you think you're going to hear the other person really well? You're like,
miss it.
huh? What are you saying? I can't hear you. Like,
Yeah.
what? And then you think they're saying something that they're not saying. And then when it's clear again, you're like, oh, I completely misunderstood you because I got this because of the static or the, whatever was going on in the line.
Mhm.
And that's what happens when your soul isn't well, when your heart isn't well. Soul and heart are kind of used interchangeably here, like Leslie said, because your heart is who you are. It's a big part of who you are, not just your physical heart that
Not
beats,
just the organ.
not
Yeah.
just the organ, but your heart as it consists of like your soul, and your mind, will, and emotions, because out of your heart, actually, this is a really good point to make this point of your heart. It talks in the Bible about your heart. Out of the heart come the issues of life. May you be, is it Paul or somebody who talks in the New Testament about may you be in health and prosper even as your soul prospers.
Mhm.
And if you look up the root words of heart in the Bible, often it means more than just your physical beating heart. It means the core, the essence of who
That
you
place
are.
that you love from, really
Yes,
is what it is. The place-
exactly.
that's probably the best description for people. Like, the place that you love from, and it's coming from your heart. Like, it's not coming from your head. Like, you feel it inside of
Right.
you. Like, that's
which has
the
to do with
place.
your emotions,
Yeah.
like your emotions and your will.
Mhm.
And so knowing that that's what we mean when we talk about heart. And a lot of Christians, when you start talking about your heart, they're like, oh, but your heart is deceitful and it's really wicked.
Mhm.
That verse that says your heart is deceitful above all
Above all measure. or something like
yeah,
that,
like it's anyway. scripture. I should know this because I was taught this so many times as a kid growing up. So I should know this verse by heart. I am. I'm so proud of myself.
And we're actually going to talk about that in the next episode too. So make sure you like and subscribe because we're going to talk about ideas around that scripture.
Yes.
The whole episode.
But this next episode,
Yes.
subscribe to hear that.
Yeah, this episode kind of segues into that. It sets you up for that. But that is such a, like, I want to just throw up on my shoes every time I hear a Christian say, oh, but your heart, you can't trust it. Like, it's not. That verse, that whole thing is taken so far out of concept or context. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then we just re-traumatize people when we say that, because suddenly they can't trust what they're feeling. So, oh, my depression, the anxiety, the fear, whatever. Oh, that means there's something wrong with me. And then they go into trying to like do better, be better, you know, like
They're trying to work it.
Go into
Yeah,
works,
do
even
work.
though it's not by works.
they try to, I heard this analogy from Gabor Mate, is that how you say his last name? He wrote the book The Myth of Normal.
Oh, yes.
Oh my word, you guys, you have
It's a
to
good book.
go listen to that book or read it. I'm in the middle of listening to it right now. It will make you angry and sad and excited and happy and actually have hope for the future all at the same time, because this man is brilliant, and he talks about how the myth of what we say is normal is not actually normal. We are living in a very not normal world, and we've made it normal because it just is the way it is. And a lot of things that have been like scientifically researched and backed up by science in the mental health world, he talks about, if you actually go look that up, they don't even have any results. They've never actually researched that. They just put words on paper to say, oh, we think that if you deal with this, then it's probably because of this.
Yeah.
There is a lot. Did you know that?
No.
There's
I was
a
gonna say probably
lot
got
of
agreement
research.
from one person,
Yes.
and they were like, facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he talks about how like drug companies want to sell more and more drugs
100%.
to help mental health, right? To like not actually help it, to just numb people, to tranquilize them, to like
It's the
dumb
house to
them
put out
down.
the fire.
Yes. And he's talking about how kids are getting more and more drugs these days for like ADHD and things like that. And it's
And
been
younger and
proven,
younger.
it's been proven that those drugs or whatever, they shrink your brain capacity.
That doesn't surprise
They
me.
shrink it. And there's kids nowadays who have less brain capacity because of the drugs they're on. And I love it. He's so brilliant because he's like, I'm not against drugs. He's just like, we use them to fix a problem when it should be a temporary thing that's used while we're going to the root of the issue and actually healing it. Because he's like, in his work, he's like, I have seen time and time again that people's depression and anxiety and things that is not the actual problem. There is something that happened to them when they were kids.
Yep.
Or they were teenagers, and it happened once maybe, or over and over again, whatever. They were traumatized in some way, sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally. Trauma is anything that you felt like you had to go through alone without any help.
Yeah.
That's the best explanation that I love. And so we've all been there, if we're honest, that we felt like we had to go through something alone. And when that happens, a part of you isolates itself from you and stays in that so that you can go on living, right? And he talks about how that's the problem. Like, he talks about Robin Williams, one of the happiest people who like loved people. And Robin talks about how he didn't really talk about his childhood because he was like, I just wanted people to love me. But see, like listening to what people are saying, like, what are they actually saying? He just wanted people to love him. Turns out he never was actually loved or accepted. He was bullied as a kid. He was like the weird person in school. His parents his dad was awful. He didn't like, his words were like, I think it was like scary man or like he didn't feel safe. And so think about how that changes a child's brain even. And then we're just medicating things.
And then we're just making it smaller.
Yes. And we're literally, instead of fixing the problem, he talks about this. He says, he's so brilliant. He says that most people in the world today, it's easier to label something as anxiety or depression or a behavior, or now they have this behavior term for kids who are like overly aggressive and like lash out at authority figures. He's like, what if those authority figures aren't safe? Stop blaming the child for being aggressive towards a parent or somebody else. That child probably doesn't feel safe around that person. But what we're doing is we're medicating the children, in his words, to make them more pliable, to make them more workable, to like, and he talks about how like it's easier to put a label on something, because then what happens is you don't have to take responsibility. And he's like, there's a lot of people in today's world who they would rather not take responsibility. They'd rather not go back and fix the issue because they think they're going to have to relive the pain, which isn't true. But our brains go there, right? And so instead of doing that, we just label things. So it's like, oh, it's just my ADHD. It's just my anxiety. It's just my depression. Like, we blame the label. Dismissive. Yes, we blame the label so that we don't actually have to do what he talks like about the hard work of, okay, where is this actually coming from?
Which actually, the thing is that the hard work is living with it. Like, how many people we know that have lived with depression, they're up and down and they're up and down, and maybe they can't keep stable relationships, or their marriage is struggling, their kids like suffer because of it. And this is not to put any shame on anyone. This is more to bring up the root of things, right? So that we can also give tips on getting through those things, because we've all worked on these type of things and ourselves. But like knowing those things, right? Knowing how those things came about, what traumas and stuff that came from, beginning to understand that, like doing that quote unquote hard work is actually much easier, because it actually can be done very quickly. It doesn't have to be sitting there. You're not going to go to a therapist where, I mean, maybe some therapists do this, but you're not going to go to a therapist where they sit there and they're like, all right, tell me every bad thing that's ever happened to you. Let's imagine it, relive it. Like, that's not the plan. That's not the goal. It shouldn't be. You can heal from these things without that. And like, you can heal from those traumas and therefore heal from depression, heal from anxiety, and actually have that healing side of you. We were not meant to live with anxiety and depression. And I hate that as women, it's been made so freaking normal to have anxiety.
Yes.
So normal. It's like, oh, just me and my anxiety and my coffee. Like, no, this is something that is fixable. And I can say this, I was a 3-pot of coffee day girl. I mean, coffee doesn't help if you have
you
anxiety.
said
three pots of coffee a day.
Like the big
Pots.
12 cup.
Like, you make a big pot of coffee, old school, get your bun coffee, make coffee.
Yeah.
3 pots a day. The pot in the morning, pot in the afternoon, pot in the evening. And it doesn't help with anxiety, but I did that when I had anxiety.
Is that even anxiety, or is your body just going, I can't handle more caffeine?
But it was both. It was both.
Like, it's probably not. It's just caffeine and adrenaline.
I was actually exhausted at that point in my life.
Yeah.
But when you like, it's been made too normal and like too normal to live with, and like it's a joke, and like it's, you know, we have freaking t-shirts made about it. The moms are walking around with it on. I just say moms because they make it up.
It's become an identity instead of a problem that's actually not normal. Not saying that people are weird when they have it, but it's like it's become an identity instead of a, hey, your arm is bleeding, let's get you some help, right? Like, if somebody's arm is broken, they're like, oh, I'm the person with the broken arm. Like, this is me. This is my identity.
Never wear that as a badge of honor.
No,
the way
you'd be like, I need a doctor now. Please set my arm. Like, I need this fixed. Wouldn't it be strange if you went to a doctor's office if you had a broken arm or a broken finger or whatever, a broken bone of some sort?
They're like, here's the t-shirt that says your arm is broken.
Or they'd be like, let's just give you medication and like take the pain away and you'll be fine. You'll heal. It's okay. Yeah, you'll probably heal, but you might have an arm that looks hella weird. Yeah. Or you might have a pinky finger that's like hanging down next to you. Like, it might heal that way. Yeah, you'll heal, but it will be very deformed. And
you're still gonna have pain.
You're still gonna have pain. It's a coping mechanism. It won't actually ever heal itself. Like, what if we treated the physical world like we treated mental health and trauma? Or like, what if we did that?
What would that look like?
That would just look like
how awful
chaos.
would the physical like body and physical health look if we treated it the same way that we treat the mind?
But there's people walking around every single day with broken bones and gashes in their soul. And we're just throwing medication at it like, hey, let's just make sure you don't feel anything.
And the thing is, when you do that, that just gets passed down to, it's going to get passed down to your kids. It's transferred over to your sister, your friends, all those people. it's not just something that you're holding in and hiding. It's not. It's something that is passed around and it is distributed. It is something that is very real and existing. It is contagious. It is all of those things. And so getting to the root cause of those things, I think, is the biggest thing that we want to talk about here, and actually talking about the different ways that you can help those things. Because there have been people that have gone to, say, a church member or someone, and they have gotten the advice, which we've already mentioned, of like, you know, you just need to have more faith. You need to pray more. You need to be less selfish. And that's not about what it's about at all. If anyone tells you that, throw up 2 middle fingers and walk away.
Yeah.
You're
For
not,
real.
they're not loving you, they're dismissing you, they are being harmful and unkind, and they're not being
honestly,
loving.
even those people, like, I think so often they have no idea how to handle that. And so they're just like, we'll pray for you. And they take off because it makes them nervous, right? Like they have no idea how to handle that. And that is one of the reasons, like, we want to talk about this conversation, is because I've been there, right? Like, asked for help and like, I don't know. And like, they walk away. But there's so many other better ways. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it's because nobody is taught how to actually help themselves heal. So you're asking a bunch of hurting people, hey, how do I help heal myself? And they're so uncomfortable because they were taught that
you're bringing up their stuff.
Yes, you're bringing up their stuff. And they were taught that, well, there's something wrong with you if you have those issues. So they're doing the best to keep their beach ball underwater, and they don't have enough energy to actually help you keep yours underwater, you know, because there's enough.
That's
like
essentially what they're going to
a
do.
lot of times they're holding on like 5 beach balls and they're
Right.
like, I'll pray for you.
right. Because like most of us have no idea how to actually help go through to the, okay, how do you actually fix the root of this? Like, I want to be free of this forever. Well, we're here to help you with that.
Yeah.
From the things that we've learned, because we've all gone through healing. Like, we're not talking here being like, oh, we're the experts. And like, no, we are talking from experience. From, we have been through a lot of these things. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure that I probably had, I had anxiety a lot. Even as a small kid, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Most people didn't, like, I didn't know. And, you know, those times when my physical heart felt like it was going to stop, and I couldn't breathe right because of the pain, I'm pretty sure that was anxiety too. Because
that sounds like the panic attacks I shared in my story that one time.
But nobody told, like, I didn't even know what that was until Berlin told me like a couple days ago. She's like, you know, that's like what anxiety feels like. And I was like, no shit, I didn't know that.
She's like, I think I'm having heart
I'm not
problems.
laughing
Like,
at you, but I was like, I've been there.
Yeah.
I
I'm
just
like,
thought I was dying.
oh, that's anxiety. Oh, that makes sense. Because it literally feels like somebody's standing on your chest and you can't breathe. You're like,
and it doesn't matter how much you try to fill your lungs.
Yeah, you just can't, you have to stop trying to fill your lungs, and you just have to breathe really shallow until the pain goes away. Okay, if I would have known that when I was like 5 years old or 10 years old, when this started happening, I would have known, like, okay, this is actually, I wouldn't have, first of all, had the fear I had, because I was like, am I going to die? Like, I literally thought I was going to die. But then I would have also known, like, oh, my shitty childhood is contributing to this. Like, my mom had trauma when she was carrying me. It passed through the DNA. I was born traumatized, not even wanting to be. My mom didn't even want to be. Like, my mom did the best she could with what she had, right? Like, she didn't mean for that to happen. Right. But it happened because she didn't know. You know, most of us are just doing the best we can with what we know until we know better. So
yeah. So often, like, we go into a church and what do they say? We've got biblical counselors that you can talk to.
Run.
Again, that's the whole premise. Like, we kind of talked about that. We already kind of covered all this, but we're going to put the label on it this time.
Yeah.
That's literally the putting out the fire for building a house. I love that because it makes no sense. And that's exactly, it's exactly the case. There's 90% of the time, it's soul issues that they're trying to put a spiritual band-aid on. And the spiritual side is going to support it, but that's just it. It's a support, not a way of healing, not a way of, you know,
or they try to do deliverance. You're trying to deliver somebody from themselves.
You can't deliver a mindset.
No, like, you're literally re-traumatizing the person because they think they're possessed. They're not possessed. they're freaking hurting, and their heart is like trying to do what it can or has to survive, because it's being triggered all the time by things that it thinks the bad things are going to happen again. So it just takes over the bus and drives, and you act crazy. You're not crazy. You're just hurting.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah.
I was like,
No,
deliverance is like, oh, we give the devil way too much credit. Like, he's like, it's not even, he's probably like, that's not even me doing that.
I didn't even have to do that.
Here's the thing, is that we as people have dominion over earth, and we keep blaming things on Satan when we're like, actually, no, that was your mom not being attentive to you. That was your dad not being, he was present, he was there, but he wasn't present.
Right.
That was, this bully in school. The people are the ones that have the power to put on the most of this pain. And that's usually who it's from. And so we've got to go in and handle it as such.
Right. Yeah.
So another thing that another place, kind of churches, or even just people in general, this one isn't necessarily church related, but like we talked about the licensed therapist, and we have no problem with a licensed therapist, right?
I've gone to a licensed therapist for 2 years.
Yeah, I was going to say biblical counselors are often not trained.
No.
They're thrown a list of verses for different, like, listen, I can get that shit on Pinterest.
Right.
I don't need a list of verses.
Yeah.
Right. And that's so often, I feel like, what a lot of biblical counselors are given. They're kind of run through a crash course on how to counsel people in a very generic way.
And there's no science behind it, because there's science happening when you are traumatized. There are things there are wires in your brain that are not connected, that are going the wrong way, that the wrong things are happening. That's why when something little happens, hey, the dishwasher isn't loaded properly, all of a sudden you're freaking out. That's not normal, right? Like that wires are going the wrong direction. Things are happening. So they're not trained in that stuff. And just like you wouldn't go to be like, hey, I'm having nerve problems, let me go to the deacon and see if he can do surgery on my nerves. No, you're going to a freaking hospital, right? You're going to someone who's trained in that.
Yeah.
Same thing with dealing with these things. Now, I don't think it's bad to have, when I went to counseling, I went to a therapist, like an actual therapist, a counselor, psychologist, but she was also a Christian. Okay. So we used things in there. We used heart healing, which we'll talk about as well. We used heart healing in my sessions. So having someone who is trained in the psychological side of it is key when you are dealing with something like that, in my opinion, because they need to know how that works, and not just being like, here's a deacon, here's the pastor's wife, here's, someone who knows a few scriptures, or even don't even just go to someone who's like, oh, I've just been through this on my own, like, so I can relate. No, like we don't want, what is that called when you like trauma bonding? We don't trauma bonding. We're not trauma bonding. You need someone who can help you heal from this and get to the root cause of it.
Yeah. And often it's somebody who's done the work themselves, or like has healed themselves, because somebody who's hurting has a really hard time helping somebody else who's hurting, and like, you can't give what you haven't gotten yourself first. And I think there's a lot of people out there trying to give something that first they've never actually experienced, or they've experienced it, but they've never healed. And they think that they can heal themselves by always projecting and like turning the focus, instead of turning the focus inwards, they turn the focus outwards and just try to fix everybody else.
So you're not push their own down.
Yeah. Like it takes them so that it's like distraction for them. They think that if they can help everybody else heal, then they'll be fine. They don't need help. I'm sorry. Newsflash, if you haven't done the work yourself first, you are not helping anybody. You're probably making it worse for them. And you're not really doing anybody any good. You're probably just bleeding all over everybody else in the process of trying to help them and making their clothes dirtier instead of like, and it's not even about like what you can do. It's becoming the thing that you are trying to help other people do. And becoming that thing means you go through it and you help yourself until you reach a point where you know how to help yourself. You can help yourself. You might need help here and there from other people, right? We always need people because we're built for community.
That support.
Yes. Yeah. You might have something that one of your friends is like, hey, like why are you, who you've allowed in your life to have that role of like, you're really acting crazy right now. What's going on? Or like you really overreacted there. Is there something going on? Who cares about you, who loves you? But I think there's so many people in the wrong roles thinking that they're helping people, and they're just making things a whole lot worse because they're ignorant. And I think most people are genuinely trying to help people.
Yes.
It's not that they're out there trying to like screw everybody over or make them worse. They think they're helping people, and they're not, because a lot of churches are religious. I'm not saying all churches are religious, because church and religion aren't the same thing, but there's a lot of religious churches out there, and they don't want to take things outside of the four walls, because if anybody knows that somebody's not doing well from that church, then it's like somehow puts a bad name on them. No, it just lets people know that you're a human. You're a human like everybody else. And did you know that authenticity and being a human has more power than perfection and hiding things?
Yeah.
Like, when will we get to that? I'm gonna just spit on you. Sorry.
That's why I wear sleeves.
It's like, I better wear these sleeves. He's about to
Just
spit
in
on
case.
you. Like, that's the problem with religion. It's like, if we can hide things and make things look good, even though everything is going to shit under it, then we'll have more influence. No, actually, you have less. People run away from that. They can smell it from a mile away. Like, you're not going to help me because we don't know who you are.
Yeah.
You're not a human. You're not, I'm not telling you to like go tell the world that you have problems, but be honest with yourself. Like, yeah, actually, I'm not doing good. I really don't feel well. My relationships aren't good. Okay. I'm sorry that that's happening, genuinely. Now we can get somewhere, because you're not running away from it.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, is if you do go to someone for help and they aren't helpful, if you don't leave there feeling peace, feeling like a new person, and feeling more alive, like all of a sudden something that was missing in me, parts of me was gone, and like, hey, they're back again. Like, I feel like me again. Like, I feel like me again, right? I feel like the person I'm supposed to be. Then it's time to go to the next person. Don't let it end there, because so often there are people that let other people tell them like, okay, here's the help we have, and that's kind of all I have for you. And so then someone's left feeling like, well, I'm too broken. That's not true. That person just didn't have the tools to help you. Right. They didn't have the tools to help you. They didn't know what they're doing.
7 billion more people.
Yes, there's so many more people. And so do we want to talk about like the ways that we've used to heal?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we definitely support and like love the idea of a licensed therapist. Like that one, we don't want to say anything about that. But there is another way that most churches don't know about, don't talk about, that we all love. And it's really kind of gotten us where we are.
Yeah.
Like, I was going to say, I really think I could speak for all three of us on that and just say, like, really, we are where we are today because of this.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about inner healing. There's lots of different names and there's different versions of it. Some call it inner healing, some call it heart healing, some call it sozo. There's different methods of it. I actually did this in counseling with my licensed therapist. I didn't know what it's called at the time. And then now that I do these regularly, like at least several times a year, right? Sometimes there's even seasons where I'm like, all right, every 2 weeks I'm going in for one. Like, if I feel like I need it, if I'm working through some things. But like, this was something I even did then that helped me in the process of healing. So if you haven't heard the episode on my story, go back and listen to it, and you'll hear where I talk about like going through eating disorders, dealing with depression. For me, like, we all have coping mechanisms. For me, my hardcore dieting, hardcore binge eating was that's how I coped. That's what it was. There's a lot of people, that's what their coping is. For me, that's absolutely what it was. And so that's what I was using as a tool to kind of hide and push down and keep control of. That's why I kept control of everything and stuff. And so when I went through counseling for that, we used inner healing there. We used heart healing there. And basically what that is heart healing is, I mean, we may all have different description of it for me, but for me, it's basically going in, having someone guide you through basically a meditative prayer in a way. Where you're connecting with Jesus. I'm closing my eyes. I'm imagining he's right there. I'm having someone actually walk me through it, where it's like, do you see Jesus? Yes. What is he doing? He's doing this. What does he want to say to you? What do you want to talk about? What do you need to work through? And we get to the root cause of things. And in those sessions, like, I think back of those very first sessions I did on things where for me, there was one thing where it was like, if everything wasn't perfect in life, if my house wasn't perfectly clean, every task wasn't done, I wasn't allowed to enjoy anything in life until everything was perfect. Everything. That means baseboard scrubbed with a toothbrush. Like, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder back then. We've healed from that sucker too. Praise the Lord. My husband's so grateful. So why are you scrubbing the bathroom trim with a toothbrush, because
There's a part of me right now that thinks that she doesn't deserve love until everything's perfect.
exactly.
Because I need you to love me.
Exactly. But I remember going back and Jesus just telling me in these sessions, like, hey, I love how artistic you are. I love these things that you do. Like, and sitting there at the table with me while I was making jewelry with my beads and like telling me the value behind it and being able to heal me, not just from like being able to sit down and have fun, but from trauma that's happened from my parents and their divorce and from my dad leaving like in my early 20s and from a miscarriage. So many different things that I've been through to know that I can go into one session. I think I've had one time that I took 2 sessions, right? Two separate sessions we went through, 2 1-hour-long sessions. And that fast, you can have something you've been dealing with your whole life that has been causing other struggles in your whole life. And that fast, it can be something that is healed in, because like the longest one was 2 hours. Like 2 hours. Imagine if the thing that's causing anxiety in your whole life and depression, you're hating yourself, like it's causing daily struggles with you. For me, it was with food. And in an hour or 2, boom, it can be gone, completely healed.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool. You guys want to share like some of your experiences or how you explain it too, because that may help other people.
Yeah. Well, I could talk about this for another hour, but do you want to go first, Leslie?
I can.
Okay.
So, like, kind of like Berlin said, go back and listen to my story. I shared actually a big chunk of this, where I was really struggling with anxiety, had panic attacks, and it was due to religious trauma. Like, so it was like that weird mix of like the spiritual and the soul, but, like all they did was slap me on anti-anxiety medication. It didn't fix it. I was still scared to death of like those things, but it wasn't until much later, like that I finally found, like I was in a place where I just felt hopeless, right? Like I was like, I see no way out of this situation. And I had heard a friend, or I had seen a post on Facebook, a friend had tried this thing and it was amazing. And I was like, I walked up to him and I was like, hey, will you tell me about that? He's like, just do it. And I'm like, no, but like, what is it? But like, would it work for me? Cause like, you know, the situation, he's like, just do it. And I had no idea that the lady standing behind me waiting to talk to him was actually a practitioner of the thing I was questioning. And I was like, hey, like, will it work? What is it? And she was like, yeah, like I've done a lot of different aspects. And I know I'm talking really cryptic. I'm trying to like protect people.
Yeah.
But when it came down to actually going to this session, she was like, well, what do you want to see? Like, you know what you're feeling right now and you don't know why, but what are you wanting to see? And at first it really felt like the house and the fire, right? Like it really felt like it was like not associated, but it's really amazing how there's a lot of different modalities. And this is a very different modality from what that Berlin just shared about. But it was like, hey, all right, well, what is like getting in the way? What are the walls that are stopping you from getting there? And literally Jesus and I walked through, and every lie that I was believing, everything I was telling myself, everything that I believed was true that wasn't his truth. He was like, hey, but you know, here's the truth. And it's amazing what happens when you hear the truth from Jesus. Like I can hear the truth from somebody and sometimes my thoughts can overpower it.
Yes.
But when you hear it directly from Jesus, and that's one of the things, like, this is what biblical counseling is trying to do, but it falls so short. Like hearing that truth from Jesus changes things on a dime, right?
Yes.
And so like, it's amazing how this issue that I'm having right now at like 30 years old at the time, was actually stuff from whenever I was 5 and 8, and like weird things that happened that young set my mind up in a way that it just continued to, like, it couldn't process things the correct way. Like I kept going back to that because I never fully processed the emotions and the aspects of those situations in my life. And so it's allowed me to literally, I always call it like the domino effect. You go back and you find that first domino, find that root, and it takes care of every other domino that was based on that first one, right? So it knocks over everything in a line. So when we can go in and find those roots, that's what's so key. And that's what I love so much about inner healing, heart healing, these modalities, is Jesus helps us get to the root, and he speaks the truth, not only over that, but his truth then resonates through everything we've been through.
Mhm.
And it continues to talk to the future and resonate in everything we do moving forward. And so all of a sudden you kind of wake up after one of these sessions the next day and you go about your day and all of a sudden a habit's changed and you're like, well, that's a new thought. Like normally this is the way I would think, but that's changed. It's really fascinating that it can have such a lasting impact with an hour too.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I loved it so much. I was like, I'm doing that. Like, I'm doing that. I did one session and I signed up to be a practitioner. I was like, I got to help people. Like more people need this. And so it's really amazing. And just seeing all the different things it can help with. It's not a one-trick pony. It's not just for anxiety. It's not just for depression. It's not just for any certain thing. Like it fits anything. Jesus' truth fits anything and can fix anything.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes we need that second person, that help to come alongside and go, hey, you don't have to think too much, overthink it. You can just focus on him and I'll help guide you through. And I think that's huge.
Yeah. I love that. There's so many different ways to the same result. And I personally, so I'm part of the Undivided Heart team, and the Undivided Heart is heart healing, like helping people heal from trauma and these things. And I never saw myself doing this. Like if you would have told me, a couple of years ago that I'd be doing this, I would have been like, that's great. I don't have any time for that. It's because I didn't understand it. But first of all, I was hurting and I didn't want to look at my own things. But the thing, like what I keep hearing through like you, Leslie, and you, Berlin, is the thing of when you not only hear truth from the truth, the person of truth, but you experience it. Because in those moments you were experiencing, right? You weren't just hearing it, you were experiencing something entirely new. And experience creates beliefs, which create mindsets. So how do you change a belief and a mindset? You have a new experience. And beliefs and mindsets change automatically. That's why when you said, Leslie, like you wake up one morning and you like are faced with something, or you go through something and you normally would react one way and suddenly you're responding in a whole different way. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
I like, okay, I totally didn't do that the way I normally do. It's because your experience changed and your mindsets and beliefs changed. And it's you don't even know that it's happening, but it's a rewiring of your brain back to the normal healthy version. And so as a result, your behavior changes, the way you do things changes. And that's why it's so powerful. 1 hour can undo 30 years of dealing with something because you actually went back and you rescued that part of yourself. So for me, I was very, very split up in many different pieces. It's like somebody dropped a glass on the floor and it shattered, and you try to find all the pieces and put them back together, but you can't because it's in pieces, right? That was what happened, because when trauma happens, it doesn't matter how many times it happens to you. Every single time that thing happens, it can be the same thing that happens over and over. Let's say it happens it happens every day for a year, or it happens every week for a year, or it happens 5 times, whatever. Every time something new experientially happens, that's traumatic, a new part of you takes on the responsibility of protecting you from that and breaks off and becomes disassociated from you. So you can do heart healing over the same thing many times over because it's a new part each time, especially if that thing was a repeated trauma in your life, because every single time something happens, a new part of you breaks off, right? Because the part that experienced it the first time has already broken off and it's isolated itself. And so, that's why for me, I tried the biblical counseling thing before I knew about heart healing. And I felt like I was being put on the hot seat and like, what's wrong with you? And I was so uncomfortable. Like, talk about walls going up, not down. Like, I was not comfortable. I was like, get me out of this church's office as fast as I can. Ooh, it was tense. It was not conducive to healing at all. And so 3 years ago, I experienced heart healing for the first time. It was actually with the Undivided Heart. And a mentor in my life actually paid for a few sessions. He was like, hey, if I got you some sessions, would you do it? And I was like, yes, because at this point, I knew that I wasn't acting like myself. I knew that things happened that triggered me, and I would become somebody else. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I hated myself for it. And then I would afterwards, after I stopped being triggered, I would be like, you are so dumb. What is wrong with you? Like, I would self-depreciate, which, newsflash, isn't helping. It's making things worse, right? But we try to fix ourselves, and I was barely holding it together.
And that's not humility. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
that's not humility.
No. You're probably
that is hatred towards yourself. If you're saying nasty things that would be nasty to say to someone else, or you're saying them to yourself, it's not humility. You're a nasty person. You're being nasty to yourself because you need to heal something.
Yeah. And I had a lot of self-hate and hatred, would talk to myself in ways I wouldn't talk to other people. But I did heart healing, and I just remember, for the first time in my life, having such realizing that the things I was dealing with weren't evil, sinful things. I wasn't possessed, or I wasn't the devil had me and was making me do things. It was just parts of me that were taking over when they were triggered. They thought the thing that had happened in the past was going to happen again, and they got triggered, and suddenly 5-year-old Bethany was driving the bus, or 10-year-old Bethany, or 2-year-old, whatever. And it's why I acted like a 2-year-old, like a 5-year-old, like a 13-year-old. It's anytime a part of me got triggered that was isolated, it took over, and I couldn't control it, because that part of me was coming out. And that's why disassociative, different personalities, that disorder, all of that's just parts of people coming out. It's just, they are triggered and they're coming out because they think that the thing that happened in the past is going to happen again. And so heart healing for me was a treasure hunt, not a sin hunt. It was a treasure hunt.
That's good.
To go find the parts of me that were still stuck in the past, let them know, hey, I'm not there anymore. I'm so sorry this happened to you. You can drop all of that and come home, and you don't have to live in this pain anymore. I didn't know you were here, but I know now, and I'm here to get you. And doing that with Jesus, and letting Jesus see that part of your heart, or letting that part of your heart see Jesus and interact, the whole triune, the trio scenario right there was so powerful, because when your heart realizes the truth, it wants to be free. Nobody's heart wants to stay captive, right? So it changed my life, to the point where physically I changed. I would get really tired after inner healing sessions.
I need a day.
You just want to go to bed, because what happens is trauma you've been holding physically gets released, because when you go through something traumatic, your body stores the emotion that you're shoving down, and suddenly it's allowed to come out and it be expressed, and you're doing this
it's
healing.
like having surgery.
Yes, it's literally like surgery. Yes. And you go and you sleep because your body has released it, and suddenly you realize just how tired you actually are.
You don't
from
realize
carrying
just how much you were carrying.
Yes. And it's so, to say the least, heart healing changed my life. And when I was asked to be on the Undivided Hearts team, I was
which means that basically Bethany helps facilitate people through these type of sessions.
Yeah, I do heart healing for people, because I realized, I was the amount of freedom, and I don't have to go back and shore up what happened in that hour, because it's so complete. It's a new experience, and it creates new mindsets and beliefs as a result, right? I don't have to go back and make sure that I still stay free, or I still am whole. It happened, and it's so complete and final, and that part of you grows up in an instant and becomes a part of you. It's it's a miracle. It's literally doing miracles for people. And I never had to relive the trauma. That's the thing that I realized, I never actually had to relive the bad thing. I was scared that if anything came up, I'd have to relive the terror or the anger or the fear or the whatever. And it's not you don't relive anything. You just go back and find those parts of you and bring them back home. They don't have to, the only thing they have to live is the truth and the freedom. That's the new experience, right? So there's so much more I could say about this. I probably need to wrap it up, but I realized that the things I was trying to fix by going to quote unquote biblical counseling and things like that, and they were, telling me that trying to fix me, all it needed was just bringing me back to myself, reintegrating myself back to me. And as a result, a lot of issues went away in my life. And a lot of cycles stopped, a lot of patterns stopped that just kept like happening over and over, almost like clockwork. And so now like being able to do that with other people is just the coolest thing ever, because we're literally changing the world.
Yeah.
Changing the world. Like when people become whole, they help other people heal instantly. I know now that when I walk into a room, people like, it is amazing the things that people come up and just tell me, because they know I'm a safe person, right? Not because I've told them anything, but they like, people know. It's like that cardionosis, right? Like your heart, I could get into this. The monks used to do this, and I think they still do it, where like their hearts, they so believed in the knowledge and the goodness of your heart, which will be in the next episode.
I was going to say
that they would walk into the room and they would start to know things instantly because their hearts were communicating, and they were getting information and downloads from that person and vice versa.
Wow.
But think about it. That happens when you walk into a room and you start to know things about people, like that person isn't a good person. That person isn't safe. They're hurting. They're pissed off. Your heart is interacting with their heart. You come into a room and the energy and frequency from your heart is radiating out, and it's giving information and receiving information. And so think about it. When you're a whole person, you walk into a room, the power of what can happen in that room for other people.
Yeah.
So I'm the big, huge proponent or a supporter of heart healing. And, it can be called trauma healing. It can be called.
It's got a lot of different names.
Yeah. It's just connecting yourself back to yourself, like getting rid of the trauma, rescuing those parts of you with Jesus and having a new experience. And in like, one experience can change your life completely.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I mean, the thing to summarize it, we recommend, like, if you're dealing with any kind of depression, anxiety, any kind of mood struggles, you feel like you're just not at peace with yourself. You're not waking up every day feeling like alert and alive, and like you can have a calm day, even if you're in the midst of chaos of things happening around you. Like, check into heart healing. Get a licensed therapist if you need to. A little note that I'll make is I think that using those two paired together works really well if you have if you feel like outside circumstances are impacting it. So maybe you've got internal things that are causing anxiety, but you also know like your relationship with your mom is really dysfunctional, or your marriage is struggling, and you need tangible tactic advice to actually help with those relationships and what to do. That's where therapists and stuff can be super, super helpful, of knowing how to respond, knowing how to set boundaries for yourself, knowing how to handle those relationships, divide, whatever you need to do with those relationships and stuff, but how to actually function in the daily life while at the same time you're working on healing those things from the inside out.
Yeah. Yep.
I agree.
Man, this has been so good. Yeah. Thanks guys for joining us. And hopefully this was helpful for you. And you've been dealing with like, man, I should, because I need to, because people told me to. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You do what's best for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the people who aren't in church can help you the most with those things, because they're licensed therapists or they're like, they've done the work and they now know, like they've gone through the course or whatever and have become the thing. And so anyway, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.